Mark Grayson's temporary loss of his Viltrumite powers in Invincible is like a superhero version of a midlife crisis, except instead of buying a sports car or growing a questionable mustache, he's stuck watching other heroes do his job while he sulks on the couch. Losing his powers hit Mark right in the ego, much like how men feel when they can't open a pickle jar or their Wi-Fi stops working during the big game. For Mark, being invincible wasn't just what he did, it was who he was. Without his powers, he felt less like a superhero and more like an extra in his own story. This whole ordeal hilariously parallels the struggles men face when their manhood gets challenged by life's curveballs. Whether it's losing a job, being outperformed by someone else, or realizing that their six-pack abs are now more of a dad bod, it can feel like the universe is personally trolling them. Mark's power loss was basically the Viltrumite version of, I'm not crying, you're crying, but here's the kicker, his powers do come back, and how they come back is hilarious. Let's unwrap how this absurd but essential story arc of Invincible took place. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Origin of Mark's power loss. Mark's powers disappeared following his exposure to what was called the Scourge virus, administered unwittingly by his half-brother Oliver. The incident left Mark completely stripped of his Viltrumite abilities, including his superhuman strength, durability, and most notably, his ability to fly. This virus specifically targeted Mark's Viltrumite physiology, effectively rendering him completely human, a state he had never truly experienced since his powers manifested. We have talked about Scourge virus many times in our videos before. Please check them out. But to give you a quick crash course, the Scourge virus was originally created by alien scientists as a biological weapon to stop the Viltrumite Empire's reign of terror, as they were otherwise unbeatable in combat. Later, a second strain was developed by Thetis, a rebel Viltrumite leading the coalition of planets, to target the remaining Viltrumites after their population had been decimated by the first strain, with devastating effects on their strength and invulnerability. As Oliver later acknowledged, the exposure was accidental, but the consequences were severe and seemed potentially permanent at the time. For someone whose entire identity had become intertwined with being invincible, this loss represented far more than just physical limitation. It struck at the core of Mark's self-perception. Psychological impact. A hero without powers. The aftermath of losing his powers thrust Mark into a state of dependency that profoundly affected his psychological well-being. Eve became his primary means of transportation, as he could no longer fly to destinations on his own. This reversal of roles, from being an independent superhero to relying on his girlfriend for basic mobility, created significant emotional strain for Mark. His frustration manifested in several ways. During a notable incident involving the Third Flaxen invasion in London, Mark erupted in anger at Eve for not immediately going to help, directing similar outbursts toward Alan and Oliver. These emotional outbursts revealed his deep-seated feelings of helplessness as he watched other heroes struggle with threats he previously handled with relative ease. Beyond the practical limitations, Mark experienced a profound identity crisis. He frequently expressed feeling less of a man without his powers, indicating how deeply his self-worth had become entangled with his superhero abilities. This crisis extended to his relationship with Eve, where he developed significant insecurities about his performance and worth as a partner. The situation deteriorated to the point where Mark spent his days obsessively watching news broadcasts showing other heroes battling villains he used to defeat, further exacerbating his feelings of inadequacy and frustration. His emotional state reflected the classic hero's journey element of the dark night of the soul, a period of extreme doubt and identity questioning. Throughout Mark's powerless period, Adam Eve demonstrated remarkable patience and emotional support. Rather than viewing him differently after his power loss, she consistently reassured him of his worth beyond his abilities as invincible. Their relationship dynamic shifted during this period, with Eve taking on more protective and supportive roles. When Mark expressed insecurity about intimate moments, Eve directly addressed his concerns, telling him to stop his self-doubt and affirming that things had been fine despite his changed condition. This emotional support became crucial to Mark's psychological recovery process, even before his physical powers returned. The unexpected recovery. The pivotal moment of Mark's power recovery occurred during an intimate moment with Eve. After a period of adjustment to his powerless state, Mark and Eve engaged in a romantic encounter during which something unexpected happened. As their intimacy deepened, Mark suddenly realized they were floating in midair. His powers had somehow spontaneously returned. The moment was characterized by shock and elation, with Mark reportedly exclaiming, "My powers are back, baby," upon the realization. What made this recovery particularly notable was its unexpected nature and the specific circumstances under which it occurred, suggesting a potential connection between emotional states and Viltrumite physiology. While the exact mechanism of Mark's power recovery remained somewhat mysterious, the timing suggested several possibilities. Some evidence indicates that intense emotional or physical states might have triggered a physiological response that overcame or purged the effects of the Scourge virus. The intimate nature of the moment with Eve created precisely such an intense physiological state. Alternatively, it's possible that the virus simply had a limited duration in Mark's system, and the recovery coincidentally occurred during his time with Eve. However, the dramatic timing of the recovery during a moment of intense connection suggests more than mere coincidence. This experience fundamentally altered Mark's relationship with his powers and identity. Having lived without his abilities, he gained a new perspective on what truly defined him as a person versus what defined him as invincible. The recovery moment marked not just a return to his previous state, but an evolution into a more psychologically complex hero who understood the value and limitations of power. For Mark and Eve as a couple, this episode strengthened their bond through vulnerability and support. Eve had seen Mark at his lowest point and supported him unconditionally, while Mark had learned to value Eve beyond her role as a fellow superhero. The intimate nature of his power recovery further cemented their connection, creating a unique shared experience that few other superhero couples could relate to. The manner of his power recovery during an intimate moment with Eve has become an iconic scene in the series, demonstrating how Invincible frequently blends superhero conventions with deeply human experiences. More than just a return to status quo, this event marked a transformation in how Mark understood his powers, his identity, and his relationships, creating lasting repercussions throughout the remainder of the story. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.